The sun beat down mercilessly on the Montana territory as Aurora Owens pressed her face against the narrow window of her prison, watching dust devils dance across the barren landscape. It was 1878, and for 3 years since her parents' deaths, when she was just 18, she'd been locked away in this remote cabin by her Uncle Silas, a man whose cruelty knew no bounds. The small window, barred with iron, offered her only glimpse of freedom, a world that carried on without her while she withered away like a flower deprived of light. Aurora's fingers traced the rough-hewn wood of the windowsill, worn smooth by her daily vigil. Her once vibrant auburn hair hung limply around her pale face, and her green eyes, once bright with dreams of adventure, had dimmed with each passing season. Yet somewhere deep inside, a spark of defiance refused to die. "Girl, get away from that window!" Her uncle's voice boomed from the other side of the locked door. Aurora flinched but didn't move immediately. These small rebellions were all she had left. "I said now!" The door rattled as he struck it with his fist. "Don't make me come in there." With a sigh, Aurora retreated to the small cot that served as her bed. The cabin room was sparse: a cot, a small table, a basin for washing, and a wooden chest containing the few possessions her uncle had allowed her to keep. Books were forbidden, as were paper and pencil. Silas Owens believed an educated woman was a dangerous woman, and he had no intention of letting his niece become either. Aurora knew why he kept her locked away. Her parents had left their modest ranch and savings to her, not to Silas. But until she married or turned 25, her uncle served as trustee of the estate. For 3 years, he had used her inheritance to fund his gambling and drinking, all while keeping her hidden away from the world, telling the townsfolk she was touched in the head and needed seclusion. The floorboards creaked outside her door. Aurora tensed as she heard the scrape of the key in the lock. The door swung open to reveal Silas, his face flushed from whiskey, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Dinner," he grunted, shoving a plate of beans and stale bread at her. "Eat quick. I've got business in town." Aurora took the plate without a word. She had learned that silence was safer than speech when it came to her uncle. "That new rancher Caldwell is asking too many questions about you," Silas said, leaning against the door frame. "Told him you were simple-minded and sickly. That seemed to shut him up." He gave a cruel laugh. "Wouldn't want anyone getting ideas about rescuing you now, would we?" Aurora's heart quickened at the mention of someone asking about her. It had been so long since anyone had shown interest in her existence. "Who is Caldwell?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Silas scowled. "None of your concern. He bought the Thompson place last month. City boy playing at being a rancher, if you ask me." He straightened up. "I'll be back tomorrow. Don't go getting any foolish notions while I'm gone." With that, he closed the door, the lock clicking into place with chilling finality. Aurora heard his heavy footsteps retreat, followed by the sound of his horse galloping away. Only then did she allow herself to hope. Someone had asked about her. Someone named Caldwell. Aurora ate her meager meal slowly, savoring each bite. Food was one of the few pleasures left to her in this isolated existence. When she finished, she moved to the window again, pressing her face against the cool glass as the sun began to set, painting the vast Montana sky in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, she could see the silhouette of a rider approaching. This was unusual. Visitors to her uncle's remote property were rare, and given that Silas had just left for town, Aurora's curiosity was piqued. She watched as the rider drew closer, revealing a tall man on a chestnut horse. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who had spent his life in the saddle, despite what her uncle had said about him being a city boy. The rider dismounted at the main cabin door. Tying his horse to the hitching post, Aurora held her breath as he knocked. When no answer came, he circled the cabin, peering through windows. She ducked away from her own window, heart pounding. What would this stranger do when he found no one home? Minutes passed. Aurora crept back to the window, but the rider was nowhere to be seen. Disappointment washed over her. Perhaps he had left. Then, suddenly, a shadow fell across her window. She gasped and stumbled backward as a face appeared on the other side of the glass. The man was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, with dark hair and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he squinted against the setting sun. His expression changed from curiosity to concern when he saw her. He mouthed something she couldn't understand, then disappeared from view. Aurora stood frozen, unsure what to do. Was this Caldwell? Had he come looking for her? Before she could process these questions, she heard heavy footsteps on the cabin's small porch, followed by a forceful pounding on her door. "Hello? Is someone in there?" The voice was deep with a slight Eastern accent. Aurora approached the door cautiously. "Yes," she called, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I'm Aurora Owens." There was a pause. "Miss Owens, I'm Isaac Sutton. I've been looking for you. Your uncle told folks in town you were unwell. But that doesn't explain why this door is locked from the outside." Aurora pressed her palm against the rough wood of the door. "He keeps me prisoner," she said, her voice trembling. "Has for 3 years, since my parents died." She heard a sharp intake of breath, then the sound of something heavy being dragged across the porch. "Stand back from the door, Miss Owens," Isaac called. Aurora retreated to her cot, heart pounding as she heard a tremendous crash. The door shuddered but held firm. Another crash followed, and then another. On the fourth impact, the lock splintered, and the door burst open. Isaac Sutton stood in the doorway, breathing hard, a large log clutched in his hands. He dropped it and surveyed the small, sparse room and its occupant. Aurora knew what he must be seeing. A thin, pale young woman in a faded dress, with haunted eyes and hands that couldn't stop trembling. He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair. His eyes, a deep blue she hadn't been able to discern through the window, held a mix of anger and compassion. "You're free with me," he said softly, extending his hand toward her. "If you want to be." Aurora stared at his outstretched hand. Freedom. The word seemed foreign after so long in captivity. "My uncle will come back," she whispered. "He'll be furious." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I'm not afraid of Silas Owens, and you shouldn't have to be either." He stepped into the room, his presence filling the small space. "I bought the neighboring ranch last month, kept hearing rumors about Silas's reclusive niece. Something didn't sit right, so I started asking questions." Aurora hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, the grip gentle but secure. "Why would you help a stranger?" Isaac's expression softened. "My sister went missing 5 years ago. She was never found. I couldn't help her, but maybe I can help you." He squeezed her hand lightly. "We should go before your uncle returns. You can decide what you want to do after you're safe." Aurora looked around the room that had been her prison for 3 long years. There was nothing here she wanted to take with her. Nothing except the small locket containing a miniature portrait of her parents, which she wore around her neck, hidden beneath her dress. "I'm ready," she said, straightening her shoulders. Isaac nodded, a hint of a smile crossing his face. "My horse is outside. Can you ride?" "I used to," Aurora replied. "Before—" She gestured at the room. "You'll remember," he assured her. "It's not something you forget." They stepped out onto the porch, and Aurora inhaled deeply, savoring her first unrestricted breath of fresh air in years. The sky had deepened to a rich indigo, the first stars beginning to appear. The vastness of it made her dizzy. Isaac steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Take your time," he said. "We're in no rush." But Aurora was eager to put distance between herself and her prison. She followed Isaac to his horse, a magnificent chestnut with a white blaze down its face. The animal nickered softly as they approached. "This is Copper," Isaac said, stroking the horse's neck. "He's strong enough to carry us both until we can get you a mount of your own." He helped Aurora mount, then swung up behind her. She tensed at the unfamiliar proximity to another person after so long in isolation, but the warmth of him at her back was reassuring rather than threatening. "Hold on," he instructed, reaching around her to take the reins. As they rode away from the cabin, Aurora didn't look back. There was nothing there for her but pain and confinement. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility and freedom. They rode in silence for a time, the rhythmic motion of the horse soothing Aurora's frayed nerves. The night air was cool against her face, carrying the scent of sage and pine. Stars blanketed the sky above them, more than she remembered. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "My ranch," Isaac replied. "It's about an hour's ride from here. You'll be safe there while we figure out what to do about your uncle." Aurora nodded, though she wasn't sure he could see the gesture in the darkness. "You said you bought the Thompson place." "That's right. It was run down when I got it, but I've been fixing it up. It's not much to look at yet, but it's home." "You're not from around here," Aurora observed. It wasn't a question. Isaac chuckled, the sound rumbling against her back. "That obvious, huh? No, I'm from Boston originally. Came west after—" He paused. "After my sister disappeared. Needed a change." "I'm sorry about your sister," Aurora said softly. "Thank you," he replied, his voice equally soft. "Her name was Eleanor. She was 2 years younger than me. Always dreamed of adventure." They fell silent again, each lost in their own thoughts as copper carried them steadily through the night. The moon rose, casting the landscape in silver light. Aurora marveled at the beauty of it all, feeling as though she were seeing the world for the first time. Eventually, the silhouette of a ranch house appeared on the horizon. As they drew closer, Aurora could make out a modest 2-story structure, a barn, and several outbuildings. Lamplight glowed in one of the downstairs windows. "Home sweet home," Isaac said as they approached. "Not much, but it's mine." He helped Aurora dismount, steadying her when her legs wobbled beneath her. "Easy there," he murmured. "You'll get your land legs back soon enough." A bark echoed through the night, and a large black and white dog bounded toward them from the direction of the house. Aurora shrank back instinctively, but Isaac laid a reassuring hand on her arm. "That's just Max," he said. "He's harmless." The dog skidded to a halt before them, tail wagging furiously. He sniffed at Aurora's skirts, then looked up at her with soulful eyes. "He likes you," Isaac observed. "He's usually wary of strangers." Aurora reached down cautiously to pat the dog's head. His fur was soft beneath her fingers, and he leaned into her touch, eliciting a small smile from her. "Come on," Isaac said, leading the way to the house. "Let's get you settled." As they approached, the front door opened, and a woman stepped onto the porch, a shotgun held loosely in her hands. Aurora tensed, but Isaac waved casually. "It's just me, Martha," he called, "and a guest." The woman lowered the shotgun. She was in her 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You found her then," she said, her gaze assessing Aurora. "This is Aurora Owens," Isaac confirmed. "Aurora, this is Martha Wilson, my housekeeper and the closest thing to a mother I've got out here." Martha snorted. "Housekeeper, cook, accountant, and voice of reason, more like." She stepped aside to let them enter. "Come in, child. You look half-starved. I'll fix you something to eat while Isaac explains himself." The interior of the ranch house was warm and inviting, with simple but sturdy furniture and walls lined with bookshelves. Aurora's fingers itched to touch the volumes she glimpsed there, having been deprived of reading material for so long. Martha ushered her to a chair at the kitchen table and bustled about, putting together a plate of cold chicken, bread, and cheese. "Eat," she commanded, placing it before Aurora. "We can talk after you've got some food in you." Aurora didn't need to be told twice. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, while Isaac and Martha conversed in low tones by the stove. She caught snatches of their conversation references to her uncle, to the law, to something called the Patterson case that seemed to concern them both. When she had finished eating, Martha cleared her plate and set a cup of tea before her. "Now then," the older woman said, taking a seat across from Aurora. "Isaac tells me your uncle has been keeping you prisoner. Is that true?" Aurora nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm teacup. "Since my parents died 3 years ago, they left everything to me, but with Uncle Silas as trustee until I turn 25 or marry." "And how old are you now, child?" 21, Aurora replied. 4 more years under his control if the terms of the will are upheld. Martha exchanged a glance with Isaac, who had taken a seat at the end of the table. "We won't let that happen," he said firmly. "What your uncle has done is illegal. We'll go to the sheriff tomorrow." Aurora's hands tightened around her cup. "Sheriff Davis, he and my uncle are friends. He won't help me." "Then we'll go above him," Isaac insisted. "To the territorial marshal if necessary." "And in the meantime," Martha interjected, "you'll stay here where you're safe." She rose from the table. "You look dead on your feet, child. Let me show you to a room where you can rest." Aurora followed Martha up a narrow staircase to a small but comfortable bedroom. A quilt covered the bed, and a pitcher and basin sat atop a chest of drawers. A window overlooked the yard, and beyond it, the vast Montana prairie. "It's not fancy," Martha said, "but it's clean, and the door locks from the inside." She emphasized the last point, watching Aurora's face carefully. Tears pricked at Aurora's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Martha's expression softened. She reached out and patted Aurora's cheek with a weathered hand. "You're safe now, child. Get some rest. We'll figure everything out in the morning." After Martha left, Aurora sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Just hours ago, she had been a prisoner with no hope of escape. Now she was free, at least temporarily, in the home of a stranger who had risked himself to rescue her. She moved to the window, gazing out at the star-filled sky. In the distance, she could see the silhouette of mountains against the night. Somewhere out there was her uncle, likely returning to find her gone. What would he do? How far would he go to get her back? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Aurora," Isaac's voice was muffled by the wood. "I've brought you some things you might need." She opened the door to find him holding a small bundle. "Martha sent these," he said, handing her the package. "Some of her clothes. They might be a bit large, but they're clean." "Thank you," Aurora said, taking the bundle. "For everything." Isaac shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. We've still got a fight ahead of us with your uncle." "Even so," she insisted, "you gave me back my freedom. I can never repay that." He smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Get some rest, Aurora. Tomorrow's a new day." With a nod, he turned and headed back down the hallway. Aurora closed the door, turning the key in the lock with a sense of profound satisfaction. For the first time in 3 years, she controlled who could enter her room. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it represented so much more. She unfolded the clothes Martha had sent: a simple cotton nightgown, a blue calico dress, undergarments, and woolen stockings. All were clean and well-mended, if somewhat worn. Aurora changed into the nightgown, reveling in its softness against her skin after years of wearing the same few garments her uncle had permitted her. As she slipped beneath the quilt, a profound weariness overtook her. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of Isaac's face in the moment he had broken down her door, determined, fierce, and kind all at once. Aurora woke to sunlight streaming through the window. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't place where she was. The room was unfamiliar, larger than her prison at her uncle's cabin, with cheerful yellow curtains framing the window and a braided rug on the wooden floor. Then memory rushed back, and with it a surge of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. She was free. The locked door of her uncle's cabin was behind her, and before her stretched possibilities she had hardly dared to dream of during her years of captivity. A soft knock at the door roused her from her reflections. "Aurora?" Martha's voice called. "Are you awake, child?" "Yes," Aurora replied, rising from the bed. She unlocked the door to find Martha standing there with a pitcher of steaming water. "Thought you might like to freshen up," the older woman said, entering to pour the water into the basin. "Breakfast is ready whenever you are. No rush." Aurora thanked her, and once alone again, washed her face and hands in the warm water. She dressed in the blue calico Martha had provided, which hung somewhat loose on her thin frame, but felt wonderful after the tattered garments she'd been wearing. There was a hairbrush on the dresser, and she used it to tame her tangled auburn locks as best she could. When she descended the stairs, she found Isaac and Martha in the kitchen. Isaac stood when she entered, his expression warming at the sight of her. "Good morning," he said. "You look rested." Aurora smiled shyly. "I slept better than I have in years." Martha ushered her to the table, where a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits awaited. "Eat up," she instructed. "You need meat on those bones." As they ate, Isaac outlined his plan for the day. "We'll ride into town this morning to see the sheriff," he said. "I know you said he's friends with your uncle, but we have to go through proper channels first. If he won't help, we'll seek out the territorial marshal." Aurora nodded, though anxiety coiled in her stomach at the thought of confronting authority figures. Her uncle had convinced the town that she was mentally unsound. Would anyone believe her over him? "What if no one helps us?" she asked quietly. Isaac's expression hardened. "Then we'll find another way. I won't let him lock you up again, Aurora. I promise you that." The conviction in his voice steadied her. This man, who had been a stranger just a day ago, was willing to fight for her freedom. It was almost too much to comprehend after years of being treated as though she were worthless. After breakfast, Martha provided Aurora with a shawl and a bonnet to shield her fair skin from the sun. "Been too long since you've been outdoors, I expect," she said. "Don't want you burning on your first day of freedom." Aurora accepted the items gratefully. "Will you come with us to town?" she asked. Martha shook her head. "Best if I stay here. Keep an eye on things." She patted Aurora's hand. "Don't you worry. Isaac will look after you." Outside, Isaac had saddled Copper and another horse, a gentle-looking bay mare. "This is Daisy," he said, introducing Aurora to the mare. "She's steady and patient. I thought she'd be a good mount for you while you get your riding legs back." Aurora approached the horse cautiously. It had been years since she'd ridden, but as she stroked Daisy's velvety nose, muscle memory began to return. With Isaac's help, she mounted, settling into the saddle with growing confidence. "You're a natural," Isaac observed, swinging up onto Copper's back. "Ready?" Aurora nodded, gathering the reins in her hands. "Ready." They set off down the dirt road that led toward town, riding side by side. The day was clear and bright, the vast Montana sky stretching endlessly above them. Aurora tilted her face to the sun, savoring its warmth on her skin. "It's beautiful," she said, gesturing to the landscape around them. Rolling hills covered in prairie grass stretched to the horizon, dotted with stands of pine and aspen. In the distance, mountains rose, their peaks still capped with snow even in early summer. "It is," Isaac agreed, watching her rather than the scenery. "Different from Boston, that's for sure. Took me a while to get used to all this open space, but now I can't imagine living anywhere else." "How long have you been out west?" Aurora asked. 3 years, he replied. "Came out after," he hesitated, "after my sister disappeared. Needed a fresh start. Worked as a ranch hand in Wyoming for a while. Then saved enough to buy this place." "You mentioned your sister last night," Aurora said softly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Isaac's expression clouded. "The not knowing is the hardest part. She just vanished one day. No trace, no goodbye. Our parents died when we were young, so it was just the two of us. When she disappeared, I had nothing left in Boston." Aurora's heart ached for him. She understood loss, having lost both her parents in a single stroke when their carriage overturned during a storm. But at least she had the certainty of their deaths, painful as it was. Isaac lived with constant uncertainty. "That's why you helped me, isn't it?" she asked. "Because of your sister." He glanced at her, then looked away. "Partly," he admitted. "When I heard rumors about Silas keeping his niece hidden away, claiming she was touched in the head, it reminded me of cases I'd read about back east. Young women locked away by relatives who wanted control of their inheritances." "Like the Patterson case you and Martha mentioned last night?" Aurora asked. Isaac nodded. "Elizabeth Patterson. Her uncle had her committed to an asylum so he could control her fortune. By the time she was released, he'd squandered most of it." His jaw tightened. "I couldn't stand by and let that happen to you." They rode in companionable silence for a time, each lost in thought. As they crested a hill, the town of Pine Creek came into view in the valley below. It wasn't much of a town, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest, scattered houses and farms surrounding it. But to Aurora, who hadn't seen it in 3 years, it was a welcome sight. "Home," she murmured. Isaac glanced at her. "You grew up here?" Aurora nodded. "My father was the town doctor. Our house was on the edge of town." She pointed to a whitewashed building set apart from the others. "There. I wonder who lives there now." "No one," Isaac replied. "It's been standing empty since your parents died." "Your uncle never moved in?" "No, he preferred his cabin in the hills, more isolated." She didn't add that the isolation had made it easier for him to keep her prisoner without interference. They rode down into the town, drawing curious glances from the few people on the street. Aurora pulled her bonnet lower, suddenly anxious about being recognized. It had been 3 years and she had changed significantly, but Pine Creek was a small town. Someone was bound to know her. "Sheriff's office is this way," Isaac said, guiding Copper toward a small building with a wooden sign proclaiming it the office of Sheriff Thomas Davis. They dismounted and tied their horses to the hitching post outside. Isaac offered Aurora his arm. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She took a deep breath and nodded, placing her hand on his forearm. Together, they entered the sheriff's office. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight outside. A desk dominated the small space, behind which sat a heavy-set man with a graying mustache. He looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from boredom to wariness when he saw Isaac. "Sutton," he acknowledged with a nod. "What brings you to town?" His gaze shifted to Aurora, narrowing slightly as he studied her face. "Sheriff Davis," Isaac replied, his tone formal. "I'd like to report a crime. This is Aurora Owens. For the past 3 years, she's been held prisoner by her uncle, Silas Owens." The sheriff's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "That's a serious accusation, Sutton. Miss Owens has been ill, as I understand it. Her uncle's been caring for her." "Imprisoned against her will is not caring, Sheriff," Isaac countered. "She was locked in a room with barred windows. I had to break down the door to free her." Sheriff Davis leaned back in his chair, regarding them both with open skepticism. "And you took it upon yourself to, what, kidnap her from her legal guardian?" Aurora stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "My uncle is not my guardian, Sheriff. I am 21 years old. He is the trustee of my parents' estate until I marry or turn 25, but he has no legal right to imprison me." The sheriff's gaze sharpened. "Aurora Owens," he said slowly. "Been a long time since anyone's seen you in town. Your uncle said your mind was affected by your parents' deaths, said you were violent, delusional." "He lied," Aurora stated flatly. "He kept me prisoner so he could control my inheritance without interference. I was never ill or violent." Sheriff Davis stroked his mustache, looking unconvinced. "That's not how Silas tells it. And I've known Silas a lot longer than I've known you, Miss Owens. Or you, Sutton." Isaac's posture stiffened. "Are you refusing to investigate these allegations, Sheriff?" "I'm saying I need more than the word of a young woman who, by her own uncle's account, isn't in her right mind, and a newcomer who's been asking suspicious questions all over town." Aurora felt despair creeping over her. This was exactly what she had feared. No one would believe her over her uncle, a man who had lived in the community for decades. But Isaac wasn't backing down. "Then perhaps we should take this matter to Judge Harrison," he suggested, "or the territorial marshal. I'm sure they'd be interested to hear how the sheriff of Pine Creek dismisses allegations of false imprisonment without investigation." Sheriff Davis's face darkened. "Now see here, Sutton." The door to the office swung open, cutting off whatever the sheriff had been about to say. Aurora turned, then froze in horror. Standing in the doorway, his face contorted with rage, was her uncle Silas. "You!" he snarled, lunging toward Aurora. "Ungrateful girl! After all I've done for you!" Isaac stepped between them, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. "Stay back, Owens," he warned. "Don't make this worse for yourself." Sheriff Davis stood, his hand also going to his weapon. Everyone calm down, he ordered. Silas, back up. Sutton, move your hand away from that gun. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Silas stepped back, though his eyes remained fixed on Aurora with murderous intent. "Sheriff," he said, his voice oily with false concern, "my poor niece has escaped my care. As you know, she's not well. This man," he jerked his head toward Isaac, "has taken advantage of her condition to abduct her from her home." "That's a lie," Aurora exclaimed. "Uncle Silas kept me locked in a room for 3 years. I was his prisoner, not his patient." Sheriff Davis held up a hand. "One at a time. Silas, you claim your niece is mentally unsound." Silas nodded vigorously. "Has been since her parents died. Violent episodes, delusions. Dr. Winters from Helena confirmed it. I've been caring for her out of familial duty, trying to keep her safe from herself and others." "And you, Miss Owens," the sheriff continued, turning to Aurora, "you claim your uncle imprisoned you to control your inheritance?" "Yes," Aurora said firmly. "I was never examined by any doctor. My uncle invented this story about my mental state to explain my absence from town after my parents died. The truth is, he locked me away and has been using my inheritance to fund his gambling and drinking." Sheriff Davis looked between them, clearly uncertain. "This is a complex situation," he said finally. "Until I can determine the truth, I think it's best if Miss Owens remains in neutral custody." "You mean lock her up?" Isaac demanded. "After what she's been through?" "Not in a cell," the sheriff clarified. "I was thinking Mrs. Holloway could take her in temporarily. She's a respectable widow, serves as a nurse for the town. Miss Owens would be comfortable there while we sort this out." Aurora looked to Isaac, who seemed torn. On one hand, the sheriff wasn't dismissing her claims outright. On the other, he was effectively placing her under another form of custody, albeit less restrictive than her uncle's cabin. "I don't trust him," Aurora whispered to Isaac, indicating her uncle with a slight tilt of her head. "He'll find a way to get to me." Isaac nodded slightly, then addressed the sheriff. "With all due respect, I believe Miss Owens would be safer at my ranch. My housekeeper, Martha Wilson, is there as chaperone, and I can guarantee Silas won't be able to reach her there." Sheriff Davis frowned. "That's hardly appropriate, Sutton. A young, unmarried woman staying at a bachelor's ranch, housekeeper or no. More appropriate than returning her to a man who locked her in a room for 3 years, Isaac countered. Silas stepped forward, his face red with anger. "I won't stand for this. She's my niece, and I'm her legal trustee. I demand she be returned to my custody immediately." The sheriff raised a hand to silence him. "No one's going anywhere until I get to the bottom of this. Silas, you say Dr. Winters examined Aurora?" "That's right," Silas confirmed. "About 3 years ago, right after her parents died." "Then I'll send a telegram to Helena today, asking Dr. Winters to confirm his diagnosis," the sheriff decided. "Until then, Miss Owens will stay with Mrs. Holloway." Aurora's heart sank. There was no Dr. Winters, at least none who had examined her, but it would take days to get a response from Helena, days during which her uncle would have ample opportunity to either get to her at Mrs. Holloway's or to flee with the remains of her inheritance. Isaac seemed to read her thoughts. "Sheriff," he said carefully, "if you're concerned about propriety, perhaps there's another solution. Aurora and I could marry. That would resolve both the issue of her living at my ranch and the matter of her inheritance. As her husband, I would become the trustee instead of Silas." Aurora stared at him in shock. Had he just proposed marriage? To her, a woman he barely knew. Silas was equally stunned, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "This is outrageous," Silas finally sputtered. "You can't marry her. She's not in her right mind. She can't consent." Sheriff Davis regarded Isaac with narrowed eyes. "That's mighty convenient, Sutton. Almost makes me wonder if this whole rescue was a scheme to get your hands on the Owens property." Isaac met his gaze steadily. "I have my own ranch, Sheriff. I don't need Aurora's, but I do need to ensure she's safe from her uncle. Marriage would accomplish that." "It's still inappropriate," the sheriff insisted. "You barely know each other." Then Mrs. Holloway it is, Isaac conceded, though his expression remained determined. For now. But I warn you, Sheriff, if any harm comes to Aurora while she's in town, you'll answer to me. The sheriff bristled at the implied threat, but before he could respond, the door opened again. A young deputy entered, looking flustered. "Sheriff," he said, "there's been a fight at the saloon. Ned Turner and Frank Mason. Mason's been shot." Sheriff Davis cursed under his breath. "I need to deal with this," he said. "Deputy Lewis, escort Miss Owens to Mrs. Holloway's. Explain the situation to her. Silas, you stay away from your niece until we sort this out. Sutton, I suggest you head back to your ranch. I'll let you know when I receive word from Dr. Winters." With that, he grabbed his hat and followed the deputy out, leaving Aurora, Isaac, and Silas alone in the office. Silas glared at them both, his eyes cold with hatred. "This isn't over," he said softly. "She's mine. The money's mine." "You'll regret interfering, Sutton." Isaac stepped forward, his stance protective. "Threaten her again, Owens, and you'll be the one with regrets." Deputy Lewis reappeared in the doorway. "Miss Owens, if you'll come with me, please." Aurora looked desperately at Isaac. She didn't want to be separated from him, not when he was the only person who had shown her kindness in years. "It's all right," he said softly, reading her expression. "I'll be close by. I won't leave town until I know you're safe." She nodded, trying to draw strength from his confidence. As she followed the deputy out, she felt her uncle's eyes boring into her back, a silent promise of retribution that made her shiver despite the warm day. Mrs. Holloway's house was near the church, a tidy white cottage with a small garden in front. The widow herself was a brisk, no-nonsense woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "So you're Dr. Owens's girl," she said after the deputy had explained the situation and departed. "I remember you, though you were just a slip of a thing when your parents died. Can't say I ever believed Silas's story about you losing your mind. Your father was the sanest man I knew, and your mother had a good head on her shoulders, too." Relief washed over Aurora. Here, at last, was someone who didn't automatically believe her uncle's lies. "Thank you for taking me in," she said. "I know it's an imposition." Mrs. Holloway waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense. I've been living alone since my Harold passed 5 years ago. Company will be a nice change." She eyed Aurora critically. "You're too thin. Has your uncle been starving you along with locking you up?" Aurora smiled wanly. "The food was adequate, just not plentiful." "Well, we'll soon fix that," Mrs. Holloway declared. "Come along, I'll show you to your room. Then we'll have some tea and you can tell me everything that's happened." The room Mrs. Holloway provided was small but cheerful, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and curtains at the window. Like at Isaac's ranch, there was a key in the door, a small detail that meant the world to Aurora after her years of captivity. Over tea and freshly baked scones, Aurora told Mrs. Holloway her story how her uncle had taken her to his remote cabin after her parents' funeral, supposedly to help her grieve away from town, only to lock her in a room once they arrived. How he had visited town regularly without her, spreading lies about her mental state to explain her absence. How he had controlled every aspect of her life for 3 years, until Isaac Sutton had broken down her door and offered her freedom. Mrs. Holloway listened intently, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When Aurora finished, the older woman reached across the table to pat her hand. "You've been through a terrible ordeal, child," she said, "but you're safe now. And once Sheriff Davis gets confirmation that this Dr. Winters never examined you, your uncle will face justice." "If the sheriff pursues it," Aurora said doubtfully. "He and my uncle seem to be friends." Mrs. Holloway snorted. "Thomas Davis may be many things, but he takes his duties seriously. If he has proof your uncle lied, he'll act on it." She gave Aurora a shrewd look. "Now? Tell me about this Isaac Sutton, handsome young man, and willing to marry you to keep you safe, from what the deputy said." Aurora felt her cheeks warm. "He was just trying to help. We barely know each other." Mrs. Holloway said, unconvinced. The way he looked at you, according to Deputy Lewis, suggests otherwise, but never mind that now. You need rest and good food more than you need a husband at the moment." As the day wore on, Aurora found herself growing increasingly comfortable in Mrs. Holloway's company. The widow was direct but kind, treating Aurora like an adult capable of making her own decisions, a stark contrast to how her uncle had treated her. After dinner, as they sat in Mrs. Holloway's small parlor, a knock came at the door. Mrs. Holloway went to answer it, returning moments later with Isaac. "Mr. Sutton to see you," she announced, though her tone suggested she didn't entirely approve of evening callers. Isaac entered the parlor, hat in hand. He'd cleaned up since their meeting at the sheriff's office, his dark hair still damp from washing and his shirt fresh. Aurora's heart quickened at the sight of him. "Miss Owens," he said, nodding to her. "Mrs. Holloway, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Aurora assured him, rising from her seat. "Please join us." Mrs. Holloway eyed them both, then sighed. "I'll make some coffee," she said, "and leave the door open, mind you. I'll be just in the kitchen." When she had gone, Isaac moved closer to Aurora. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Has your uncle tried to contact you?" She shook her head. "No, I haven't seen him since the sheriff's office. Mrs. Holloway's been very kind." "Good." He hesitated, then added, "I've taken a room at the hotel. I'll stay in town until this is resolved, one way or another." Aurora's relief must have shown on her face, because Isaac smiled, the expression warming his serious features. "I meant what I said, Aurora. I won't let him lock you away again." "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, but especially for believing me. So few people did, even before my uncle started spreading his lies." Isaac's expression sobered. "I know what it's like to not be believed. When my sister disappeared, the Boston police thought she had simply run off with a man. They didn't take her disappearance seriously until it was too late." "I'm so sorry," Aurora said, touched by the pain she saw in his eyes. "What was she like, your sister?" A fond smile touched his lips. "Eleanor was vibrant, full of life. She loved books and art and was always planning adventures. Our parents died when she was 12 and I was 14. I did my best to raise her, but I was little more than a child myself." "You must have done well," Aurora observed. "You speak of her with such love." Isaac nodded, his eyes distant with memory. "We were close. After our parents died, it was just the two of us against the world." He refocused on Aurora. "That's why I can't stand by when I see someone being mistreated, especially someone who reminds me of her." Aurora felt a pang at his words. Was that all she was to him? A reminder of his lost sister? The thought shouldn't have hurt. They were still virtual strangers, after all. But somehow it did. Mrs. Holloway returned with coffee, effectively ending their private conversation. The three of them passed a pleasant hour discussing neutral topics: the weather, Mrs. Holloway's garden, Isaac's progress with his ranch. It was the most normal social interaction Aurora had experienced in years, and she savored every moment of it. As the clock struck 9, Mrs. Holloway cleared her throat pointedly. "It's getting late, Mr. Sutton. I'm sure you understand that Aurora needs her rest." Isaac rose immediately. "Of course. Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Holloway." He turned to Aurora. "I'll call again tomorrow, if that's acceptable." "Very acceptable," Aurora replied, smiling. After he had gone, Mrs. Holloway gave Aurora a knowing look. "That young man is sweet on you whether he realizes it yet or not." Aurora felt her cheeks warm. "He's just being kind. He sees me as a substitute for his lost sister, I think." Mrs. Holloway snorted. "If that's what he tells himself, he's a bigger fool than I took him for. The way he looks at you is not the way a brother looks at a sister, believe me." Aurora didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply bid Mrs. Holloway good night and retreated to her room. As she prepared for bed, her thoughts kept returning to Isaac, his kindness, his determination to protect her, the warmth in his blue eyes when he looked at her. It was foolish to develop feelings for him, she knew. They had only just met, and her life was in complete upheaval. And yet, She couldn't deny the flutter in her heart when he was near, or the sense of safety she felt in his presence. With these confusing thoughts swirling in her mind, Aurora drifted off to sleep, unaware of the figure watching Mrs. Holloway's house from the shadows across the street. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Aurora woke to the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from Mrs. Holloway's kitchen. She dressed quickly in the blue calico Martha had given her and went downstairs to find her hostess bustling about the kitchen. "Good morning, child," Mrs. Holloway greeted her. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," Aurora replied truthfully. "Can I help with breakfast?" Mrs. Holloway waved her to a seat at the table. "Not today, you're still recovering. Plenty of time for you to help later if you stay on with me." As they ate, Mrs. Holloway outlined her plans for the day. "I need to visit Mrs. Peterson this morning. She's expecting her fourth child any day now. You're welcome to come along, or you can stay here if you prefer." Aurora considered. On one hand, she was eager to reacquaint herself with the town after so long away. On the other, she was nervous about encountering her uncle or others who might believe his lies about her. "I think I'll stay here if that's all right," she decided. "Perhaps I could help in your garden. I've missed working with growing things." Mrs. Holloway nodded approvingly. "The garden could use some attention. There are gloves in the shed out back and tools as well. Just don't overexert yourself." After breakfast, Mrs. Holloway departed for her nursing duties, leaving Aurora alone in the cottage. For the first time since her rescue, Aurora had true solitude, not the enforced isolation of her uncle's cabin, but the peaceful aloneness of having space to herself that she could leave whenever she chose. She spent a happy hour in the garden, weeding and pruning, the feel of soil between her fingers bringing back memories of helping her mother tend their own garden years ago. The sun was warm on her back, and birds sang in the apple tree that shaded one corner of the yard. It was a simple pleasure, but after 3 years of deprivation, it felt like luxury. As she worked, Aurora became aware of someone watching her. She looked up to find Isaac standing at the garden gate, a smile playing about his lips. "You look at home there," he observed. "I didn't mean to disturb you." Aurora stood, brushing soil from her hands. "You're not disturbing me at all. I was just enjoying being outdoors." "I can imagine." He opened the gate and stepped into the garden. "I thought you might like to take a walk around town, if you're feeling up to it. Reacquaint yourself with Pine Creek." The prospect was both appealing and intimidating. "What if we encounter my uncle?" she asked. "Sheriff Davis had a word with him this morning. Warned him to stay away from you until this matter is resolved. And I'll be with you," Isaac added, his expression determined. "He won't dare approach you." Encouraged by his confidence, Aurora agreed. She put away the gardening tools, washed her hands at the pump in the yard, and retrieved the bonnet Martha had lent her. They set off down the main street, Isaac offering his arm, which Aurora took gratefully. Pine Creek was not a large town, but it had grown somewhat in the 3 years since Aurora had last seen it. There was a new general store, and the saloon had been expanded. The old schoolhouse had been repainted, and a small hotel had been built near the stagecoach stop. "It's changed," Aurora murmured, taking it all in. "Places do," Isaac replied. "People too." They passed several townsfolk who eyed them curiously. A few nodded in greeting to Isaac, but most seemed uncertain how to react to Aurora, whose reappearance after 3 years was bound to be the subject of gossip. "Don't mind them," Isaac said, noting her discomfort. "Small towns thrive on talk. They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough." They continued down the street until they reached a small building with a sign proclaiming it the office of the Pine Creek Gazette. Isaac paused. "I want you to meet someone," he said. "Edward Caldwell, the newspaper editor. He's new in town, only been here about 6 months. No ties to your uncle." Aurora hesitated. What good will meeting the editor do? "Edward believes in the power of the press to right wrongs," Isaac explained. "If the sheriff doesn't act on your behalf, Edward might be willing to publish your story. Public opinion can be a powerful force for justice." It was a sound strategy, Aurora had to admit, and having allies beyond Isaac and Mrs. Holloway could only strengthen her position against her uncle. The newspaper office was small but tidy, with a printing press in one corner and a desk piled high with papers in another. A slender man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers looked up as they entered. "Isaac," he greeted warmly, rising from his seat. "Good to see you. And this must be Miss Owens." Isaac made the introductions, and Edward Caldwell shook Aurora's hand with genuine warmth. "I've heard fragments of your story, Miss Owens," he said. "Most troubling, if true." "It is true," Aurora assured him. "Every word." Edward gestured for them to sit in the two chairs facing his desk. "I'd like to hear it directly from you, if you're willing. The truth deserves to be told." For the second time in as many days, Aurora recounted her ordeal, her uncle's deception after her parents' deaths, the years of confinement, Isaac's rescue. Edward took notes as she spoke, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "This is a serious matter," he said when she had finished. "False imprisonment, potential embezzlement of your inheritance. If Sheriff Davis doesn't act on this, I certainly will." "The sheriff is waiting for confirmation from Helena that my uncle's claim about a Dr. Winters examining me is false," Aurora explained. "But I fear even with that proof, he may be reluctant to move against my uncle. They've been friends for years." Edward tapped his pencil against his notepad thoughtfully. "Thomas Davis is many things, but I don't believe he's corrupt. Stubborn, yes. Set in his ways, certainly. But if presented with clear evidence of wrongdoing, I think he'll do his duty." "And if he doesn't," Isaac pressed, "then the Gazette will run the story," Edward said firmly. "And I'll personally write to the territorial governor." Aurora felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Here was another person who believed her, who was willing to help. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell." "Edward, please," he insisted. "And there's no need for thanks. Exposing injustice is why I became a journalist." He glanced at Isaac. "Though I must say, your rescue of Miss Owens was quite dramatic. Breaking down doors, spiriting away damsels in distress. Not exactly what one expects from a rancher." Isaac's expression remained neutral, but Aurora thought she detected a hint of discomfort. "It was the right thing to do," he said simply. Edward studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Indeed it was." He turned back to Aurora. "Rest assured, Miss Owens, your story will be told one way or another. Justice will be served." They left the newspaper office a short time later, continuing their walk through town. As they passed the general store, Aurora paused, struck by a memory. "My mother used to bring me here every Saturday," she said softly. "We'd buy penny candy, and she'd let me choose one small treasure for myself, a ribbon or a pencil, or once a tiny porcelain dog that I kept on my windowsill, until she trailed off, the memory of her lost possessions still painful. Most of her childhood treasures had been left behind when her uncle took her to his cabin, never to be seen again." Isaac squeezed her hand where it rested on his arm. "We could go in," he suggested. "You could buy yourself a new treasure." The idea appealed to Aurora immensely, a small act of independence after years of having no choices. "I'd like that," she said, "but I have no money." "Consider it a loan," Isaac offered, "until your inheritance is restored to you." Inside the store, Aurora felt like a child again, overwhelmed by the variety of goods on display. The shelves were stocked with everything from tools and fabric to canned goods and medicines. A glass case near the counter held an array of candies and small luxuries. The storekeeper, a middle-aged woman Aurora didn't recognize, watched them curiously as they browsed. Aurora was drawn to the display of hair combs and pins, something she had sorely missed during her captivity when she had only a simple wooden comb to tame her long hair. "See something you like?" Isaac asked, noticing her interest. Aurora pointed to a simple but elegant tortoiseshell comb. "It's beautiful," she said. "Practical, too." Isaac nodded to the storekeeper. "We'll take that, please." The woman retrieved the comb from the display. "That'll be 50 cents, she said, eyeing Aurora curiously. "You're new in town, miss." "Actually, I grew up here," Aurora replied. "Aurora Owens. Dr. Owens was my father." The storekeeper's eyes widened in recognition. "Dr. Owens's daughter. Well, I'll be." We were told you were away somewhere being treated for, well, for illness. I was being held against my will by my uncle, Aurora corrected gently. The illness was a lie he told to explain my absence. The woman looked shocked, then sympathetic. That's terrible, dear. Your father was a good man. Saved my husband's life when he had pneumonia 2 winters ago. She wrapped the comb in tissue paper and handed it to Aurora. No charge. Consider it a welcome back to Pine Creek. Aurora was touched by the gesture. Thank you. That's very kind. As they left the store, Aurora felt a flutter of hope. If the storekeeper's reaction was any indication, perhaps the townsfolk would be more inclined to believe her than her uncle once the truth was known. They continued their walk, eventually reaching the edge of town where Aurora's childhood home stood. It was a handsome 2-story house with a wide porch, though it now showed signs of neglect, peeling paint, overgrown garden, shutters hanging askew. Aurora stood at the gate, a lump forming in her throat as memories washed over her. Happy years with her parents, learning to read in her father's study, helping her mother in the kitchen, sitting on the porch swing on summer evenings listening to the cicadas. Would you like to go closer? Isaac asked softly. She shook her head. Not yet. It's too... She couldn't find the words to express the mixture of longing and grief that filled her. Isaac seemed to understand. Another day, then. When you're ready. They turned back toward town, walking in companionable silence. As they neared Mrs. Holloway's cottage, Aurora spotted a familiar figure on the porch, Sheriff Davis. Looks like the sheriff wants a word, Isaac observed, his posture tensing slightly. Aurora's heart quickened. Had news come from Helena already? It seemed too soon. Sheriff Davis stood as they approached. Miss Owens, Sutton, he greeted them. Got some news I think you'll want to hear. From Helena? Aurora asked hopefully. The sheriff shook his head. No, that'll take another day or two. This is about your uncle. He's gone. Gone? Isaac repeated sharply. What do you mean, gone? Left town sometime last night, Sheriff Davis explained. Packed up his things and rode out. Deputy Lewis spoke to the stable hand at the saloon where Silas boards his horse when in town. Said Silas came for his mount around midnight. Seemed in a hurry. Aurora felt a complex mix of emotions, relief that her uncle was no longer nearby to threaten her, but dismay that he might escape justice. He's running, she said, because he knows you'll find out there is no Dr. Winters, that he lied about everything. Sheriff Davis looked uncomfortable. That remains to be seen, but his leaving town does lend some credence to your claims, Miss Owens. I've sent wires to the sheriffs in neighboring counties to be on the lookout for him. What about my inheritance? Aurora asked. The ranch, my parents' house, their savings. Has he taken everything? That's a matter for the courts, the sheriff replied. But I've spoken with Judge Harrison this morning. Given the circumstances, he's willing to grant a temporary injunction freezing any assets in Silas Owens's name until this matter is resolved. It was more than Aurora had dared hope for. Thank you, Sheriff, she said sincerely. Davis nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. Just doing my job, Miss Owens. And for what it's worth, I'm beginning to think you might be telling the truth about your uncle. He never struck me as the most honest man, but I never thought him capable of what you've described. Few people show their true nature to everyone, Isaac observed. Your uncle saved his cruelty for those who couldn't fight back. He gave Aurora's hand a gentle squeeze. The sheriff cleared his throat. Well, I'll leave you to your day. Just wanted to let you know about Silas. I'll be in touch when I hear back from Helena. After he had gone, Isaac turned to Aurora. Your uncle fleeing is practically an admission of guilt, he said. This is good news, Aurora. She nodded, but worry still creased her brow. What if he's taken everything? What if there's nothing left of my inheritance? Then you'll start over, Isaac said firmly. You're young, you're free, and you have friends who will help you. That's more than many people have. His confidence was infectious, and Aurora found herself smiling despite her concerns. You're right, she agreed. Freedom is worth more than any inheritance. The days that followed fell into a pleasant routine. Aurora stayed with Mrs. Holloway, helping the older woman with household chores and accompanying her on her nursing rounds. Isaac called daily, often taking Aurora for walks around town or rides in the surrounding countryside. With each passing day, Aurora felt herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally. On the fourth day after her rescue, news finally arrived from Helena. Sheriff Davis came to Mrs. Holloway's house personally to deliver it, his expression grave. "There is no Dr. Winters practicing in Helena," he informed them as they sat in Mrs. Holloway's parlor. "Nor has there been for at least 10 years. The last Dr. Winters died in '68. Aurora felt vindicated, though not surprised. "So my uncle lied, just as I said." The sheriff nodded reluctantly. "It appears so. I've issued a warrant for his arrest on charges of false imprisonment and fraud. If he's caught, he'll stand trial." "And my inheritance?" Aurora pressed. "What happens to that?" "Judge Harrison has appointed a temporary administrator for the estate, Harold Barnes, the bank manager. He'll conduct an audit to determine what assets remain." Sheriff Davis hesitated. "I should warn you, Miss Owens, your uncle had 3 years to mismanage or misappropriate funds. There may not be much left." Aurora had expected as much, but the confirmation still stung. "I understand. Thank you for your honesty, Sheriff." After the sheriff left, Mrs. Holloway patted Aurora's hand. "Don't lose heart, child. Your parents' house is still standing, and the land they owned can't have been drunk or gambled away. You'll have something to start with, at least." Aurora nodded, trying to focus on the positive. "You're right, and I have my freedom, which is worth more than any property." That afternoon, Isaac arrived with news of his own. "I've been to see Harold Barnes," he said as they walked in Mrs. Holloway's garden. "He's begun reviewing your parents' estate." "And?" Aurora prompted, both eager and afraid to hear the results. "It's a mixed picture," Isaac replied carefully. "Your uncle did withdraw substantial sums from your parents' accounts over the past 3 years, but the house and land are untouched. He couldn't sell those without your signature or a court order declaring you incompetent, which he never sought." Relief washed over Aurora. Her childhood home was still hers. "What about the ranch?" she asked. Her father had owned a small cattle ranch outside town, managed by a foreman while he practiced medicine. "That's actually the good news," Isaac said, a smile breaking across his face. "Your uncle left it alone, probably because it required too much work to liquidate. The foreman, Jeb Miller, has been running it all this time, believing the profits were being sent to you wherever you were. He's accumulated quite a sum on your behalf." Aurora couldn't believe her good fortune. "So I still have the ranch and the house and a tidy sum in the bank once Barnes sorts everything out," Isaac confirmed. "You won't be wealthy, but you'll be comfortable. Independent." The word sent a thrill through Aurora. Independent. After years of utter dependence, the prospect of controlling her own life was intoxicating. "What will you do?" Isaac asked. "Will you sell the ranch? Keep it? Move back into your parents' house?" These were questions Aurora hadn't allowed herself to consider, believing her inheritance was likely gone. Now, faced with actual choices, she found herself uncertain. "I don't know," she admitted. "The house holds so many memories, both happy and sad, and I know nothing about running a ranch." "You could learn," Isaac suggested, "or hire someone to manage it for you as your father did." Aurora nodded thoughtfully. "I'll need time to decide. Everything has happened so quickly." Isaac took her hand, his expression serious. "Aurora, there's something I want to say." He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically unsure of himself. "When I suggested marriage at the sheriff's office, it was a tactical proposal, meant to protect you from your uncle. But these past days, getting to know you, seeing your strength and resilience," he took a deep breath, "I find myself wishing it had been a real proposal." Aurora stared at him, her heart pounding. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? "Isaac, I know it's too soon," he rushed on. "We've known each other less than a week. But I've never met anyone like you, Aurora. Your courage, your gentleness, despite everything you've endured. I find myself thinking about you constantly." Aurora felt a warmth spreading through her chest. Over the past days, she had found herself increasingly drawn to Isaac, his quiet strength, his unwavering support, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. But she had attributed these feelings to gratitude, to the natural bond that forms between rescuer and rescued. Now, hearing him express similar feelings, she wondered if there might be more to it. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Everything in my life is changing so rapidly. I'm only just beginning to understand what freedom means." Isaac nodded, a hint of disappointment in his eyes, though he tried to hide it. "I understand. It was presumptuous of me to speak so soon. Please forget I said anything." "No," Aurora said quickly, squeezing his hand. "I don't want to forget it. I just need time, Isaac. Time to know my own mind and heart without the shadow of my uncle hanging over me." His expression brightened. "Time you shall have," he promised, "as much as you need. I'm not going anywhere, Aurora." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. After years of cruelty and manipulation from her uncle, Isaac's patient understanding was like balm to her wounded spirit. In the days that followed, Aurora began the process of reclaiming her life. With Harold Barnes's help, she reviewed what remained of her inheritance. As Isaac had reported, the house and ranch were intact, along with a modest sum of money that her ranch foreman had accumulated on her behalf. Her uncle had depleted most of her parents' savings, but not all. She visited the ranch, meeting Jeb Miller, the foreman who had faithfully managed the property in her absence. He was a gruff man in his 50s who had worked for her father for over a decade. "Good to see you well, Miss Owens," he said when Isaac introduced them. "Your father was a fair man and a good employer, been running this place as he would have wanted." Aurora was touched by his loyalty. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. I know nothing about ranching, but I'm willing to learn if you're willing to teach me." Miller nodded approvingly. "Reckon I can do that. Your father wasn't much for the day-to-day operations either, but he knew enough to make sound decisions." The ranch was modest, but well-maintained 50 head of cattle, a small but sturdy ranch house, several outbuildings, and good grazing land. It wouldn't make Aurora rich, but it provided a steady income and, more importantly, independence. She also visited her childhood home, walking through the empty rooms with Isaac at her side. Dust covered the furniture, and the air smelled stale, but otherwise the house was much as she remembered it. Her father's medical books still lined the shelves in his study. Her mother's sewing basket still sat beside her favorite chair in the parlor. "It's strange," Aurora murmured as they stood in the entryway. "It feels both familiar and foreign at the same time." Isaac nodded in understanding. "It's been 3 years. You've changed, even if the house hasn't." Aurora wandered from room to room, memories washing over her happy family dinners, quiet evenings reading by the fire, her mother teaching her to sew, her father showing her his medical texts. The last memory was of the day she had returned from her parents' funeral, numb with grief, only to have her uncle announce they would be leaving for his cabin until she recovered. "I don't think I can live here," she said finally. "Not yet. Too many ghosts." Isaac didn't press her. "You have options," he reminded her. "You could stay with Mrs. Holloway a while longer, or there's the ranch house, though it's rather isolated." Aurora considered. The ranch house was appealing in some ways. It held no painful memories, and she was eager to learn about the business her father had built. But after years of isolation, she wasn't sure she was ready for the solitude of ranch life. "I think I'll stay with Mrs. Holloway for now," she decided. "She's been hinting that she could use a permanent companion. I could help with her nursing duties. I learned a lot from my father before he died." Isaac smiled. "That sounds like a good plan. Mrs. Holloway seems fond of you, and you'd be close to town while you decide what to do with your properties." They left the house, Aurora locking the door behind them. As they walked back toward town, she felt lighter somehow, as if visiting her past had helped her make peace with it. A week after Aurora's rescue, news reached Pine Creek. Silas Owens had been captured in Wyoming territory, attempting to board a train east. He He was being returned to Montana to face charges. Aurora received the news with mixed emotions. On one hand, she wanted justice for what her uncle had done to her. On the other, she dreaded seeing him again, feared the power he might still hold over her. "You don't have to attend the trial if you don't want to," Isaac assured her when he brought the news. "Your written testimony would likely be sufficient." But Aurora knew she had to face her uncle one last time. "I need to look him in the eye," she said firmly. "I need him to see that he didn't break me, that I'm stronger than his cruelty." Isaac's expression was filled with admiration. "You are the bravest person I know, Aurora Owens." The day Silas was brought back to Pine Creek, a crowd gathered outside the sheriff's office. Word of Aurora's ordeal had spread throughout the town, thanks in part to Edward Caldwell's article in the Gazette. Public opinion had turned firmly against Silas Owens, and many townspeople came out to show their support for Aurora. She stood on the boardwalk with Isaac at her side, Mrs. Holloway on the other, as the sheriff's wagon approached. When Silas was led out, hands shackled, a murmur ran through the crowd. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, his arrogance replaced by a hunted expression. His gaze found Aurora in the crowd, and for a moment their eyes locked. She saw the hatred there, the fury at being thwarted, but she also saw fear. For the first time, Silas Owens was afraid of justice, of consequences, of the niece he had underestimated. Aurora held his gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to show any sign of the fear that had dominated her life for 3 years. After a moment, it was Silas who broke the connection, dropping his eyes as the sheriff led him into the jail. "You did it," Isaac murmured, squeezing her hand. "You faced him." "And he blinked first," Mrs. Holloway added with satisfaction. A strange calm settled over Aurora. Facing her uncle, seeing him in chains, had broken whatever lingering power he held over her. She was truly free now, not just physically, but emotionally. The trial was held 2 weeks later, presided over by Judge Harrison. Aurora testified clearly and calmly about her imprisonment, the lies her uncle had spread, his misappropriation of her inheritance. Other witnesses included Martha Wilson, who testified about Aurora's condition when Isaac brought her to the ranch, and Edward Caldwell, who had investigated and confirmed that no Dr. Winters had ever examined Aurora. Silas's defense was weak claims that Aurora had indeed been mentally unstable, that he had only been protecting her from herself. Without the fictional Dr. Winters to back up his assertions, and faced with the physical evidence of the locked barred room at his cabin, his lies fell apart. The verdict was swift and decisive, guilty on all counts. Judge Harrison sentenced Silas to 10 years in the territorial prison and ordered him to repay what he had stolen from Aurora's inheritance, though all knew that was unlikely to ever happen. As Silas was led away, Aurora felt no triumph, only relief that this chapter of her life was finally closed. She could move forward now, without looking over her shoulder, without fearing that her uncle would reclaim control of her life. In the month that followed, Aurora settled into a new routine. She continued to live with Mrs. Holloway, helping the older woman with her nursing duties and learning much in the process. She visited the ranch weekly, working with Jeb Miller to understand the business her father had built, and she spent time with Isaac, their relationship deepening with each passing day. One evening in late summer, they rode out to a hilltop overlooking Isaac's ranch. The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and amber, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. "I love it here," Aurora said, watching the shadows lengthen across the land. "It's so open, so free." Isaac nodded, his eyes on her rather than the view. "That's why I came west." After Eleanor disappeared, Boston felt confining. Too many memories, too many reminders. Aurora turned to him, curious. "Do you still think about her every day?" "Yes," he admitted, "but differently now. For a long time, thinking of her brought only pain and guilt. Now, I try to remember the joy she brought to my life." He paused, then added softly, "You've helped with that, Aurora. Seeing your resilience, your ability to find joy after suffering. It's given me hope." She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. Over the past weeks, as they had grown closer, Aurora had come to recognize her feelings for what they were: not just gratitude or the bond between rescuer and rescued, but genuine love for this quiet, steadfast man who had given her back her freedom. "Isaac," she said softly, "do you remember what you said to me that day in Mrs. Holloway's garden? About wishing your tactical proposal had been real?" He nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "I remember." "I think I'm ready now," she said. "To know my own mind and heart, I mean. These past weeks have been clarifying." Isaac's expression was cautiously hopeful. "And what have you decided?" Aurora took a deep breath. "That I love you, Isaac Sutton. Not because you rescued me, though I'll always be grateful for that, but because of who you are, your kindness, your strength, your integrity. I love the way you see me, not as a victim or someone to be pitied, but as a whole person." Joy blazed in Isaac's eyes. "Aurora," he breathed, raising a hand to cup her cheek. "I love you too, more than I thought possible. When I broke down that door and saw you standing there, something changed in me. I didn't recognize it at first, but now I know it was my heart recognizing its match." He leaned forward and their lips met in a tender kiss. Aurora felt a warmth spreading through her, a sense of rightness, of coming home. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "Aurora Owens," Isaac said softly, "I don't have a tactical reason this time, just a heart full of love and a promise to cherish you always. Will you marry me?" Aurora's answer was immediate and certain. "Yes, Isaac, I will." They were married in the small church in Pine Creek, as autumn painted the surrounding hills in shades of gold and russet. Mrs. Holloway, who had become like a mother to Aurora, sat in the front pew, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Martha Wilson was there too, her usual stern expression softened by the occasion. Jeb Miller and the ranch hands came, as did Edward Caldwell and many other townsfolk who had supported Aurora during her uncle's trial. Aurora wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Holloway had helped her make, and carried a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. As she walked down the aisle toward Isaac, who waited for her with love shining in his eyes, she marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. From prisoner to bride, from isolation to community, from despair to joy, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. Yet she knew it was no miracle, but the result of courage, determination, and the kindness of people like Isaac, Mrs. Holloway, and others who had believed in her when she most needed support. "I, Aurora, take you, Isaac, to be my husband," she said, her voice clear and strong. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Isaac's hands were warm around hers as he repeated the vows, his blue eyes never leaving her face. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Isaac leaned down to kiss her, Aurora felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. This was right. This was where she belonged. The celebration afterward was held at Aurora's childhood home, which she and Isaac had spent weeks cleaning and preparing. Though she had decided not to live there permanently, they would make their home on Isaac's ranch. It seemed fitting to host their wedding feast in the house where she had known so much happiness as a child. As guests filled the rooms with laughter and conversation, Aurora found herself drawn to the porch, needing a moment of quiet to absorb the joy of the day. She stood at the railing, looking out at the town where she had grown up, where she had lost everything, and where she had found love again. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Sutton," Isaac's voice came from behind her, followed by the warmth of his presence as he joined her at the railing. Aurora smiled at the new name. "Mrs. Sutton," she repeated. "I'm still getting used to that." "We have a lifetime for you to practice," he teased, slipping an arm around her waist. She leaned into him, savoring his solid presence. "I was just thinking about journeys," she said, "how sometimes the darkest roads lead to the brightest destinations." Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. "When Eleanor disappeared, I thought my life was over. I never imagined that loss would eventually lead me west, to Montana, to you. And when my uncle locked me away, I couldn't see beyond the next day, the next hour sometimes," Aurora admitted. "I never dreamed that ordeal would lead to this much happiness." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Then Isaac turned to her, his expression earnest. "I meant what I said that first day, Aurora. You're free with me, always, free to choose, to speak your mind, to live as you see fit. I'm your husband, not your jailer." Aurora reached up to touch his face, her heart full. "I know," she said simply. "That's why I love you." The sound of laughter from inside drew their attention. "We should go back," Aurora said. "Our guests will be missing us." Isaac nodded, but before they turned to go, he drew her into a gentle kiss. "Thank you," he murmured against her lips. "For what?" she asked, puzzled. "For trusting me that day, for taking my hand when I offered it, for loving me now." Aurora smiled, thinking of that moment when he had appeared in her doorway, a stranger offering freedom. "How could I not?" she replied. "You broke down the door." 2 years later, Aurora stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Isaac rode in from checking the cattle. Their son, James, not yet a year old, balanced on her hip, his chubby hands reaching toward his father as Isaac dismounted. "There's my boy," Isaac called, climbing the porch steps to take his son in his arms. He kissed Aurora's cheek. "And my beautiful wife. How was your day?" "Busy," she replied with a smile. "Mrs. Peterson's baby arrived this morning, a healthy girl, and I finished that article for Edward's newspaper." After their marriage, Aurora had continued her involvement with Mrs. Holloway's nursing practice, gradually taking on more responsibilities as the older woman began to consider retirement. She had also begun writing a weekly column for the Gazette on health matters, drawing on her father's medical books and her own growing experience. Isaac bounced James in his arms, earning delighted giggles from the boy. "And how's my little cowboy? Been helping your mama today?" "He's been exploring everything within reach," Aurora said with a laugh, just like his father, always curious. They went inside to the cozy home they had built together. The ranch had prospered under their joint management. Isaac's practical experience combined with Aurora's quick mind for business had proven a successful partnership. They had expanded their herd, improved the grazing land, and built this new house to replace the original small cabin. After dinner, as Aurora rocked James to sleep in the nursery, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the darkest days of her captivity to this moment of profound contentment, the path had been neither straight nor easy. But each step, even the painful ones, had led her to this life, this love. Isaac appeared in the doorway, watching them with tender eyes. "He's asleep," he whispered. Aurora nodded, carefully laying their son in his crib. She covered him with a small quilt Mrs. Holloway had made for him, then joined Isaac in the hallway. "I received a letter today," Isaac said as they walked to the parlor, "from Boston." Aurora looked at him in surprise. Isaac rarely received correspondence from his former home. "What did it say?" He drew a folded paper from his pocket. "It's from the police department. They found remains that they believe may be Eleanor's." His voice was steady, but Aurora could see the emotion in his eyes. "They want me to come identify some personal effects they recovered." Aurora took his hand, leading him to the sofa where they sat close together. "Will you go?" Isaac nodded slowly. "I think I must. To know for certain after all these years." He looked at her, vulnerability clear in his expression. "Will you come with me? You and James?" "Of course," she said without hesitation. "We're a family. We face things together." Relief washed over his features. "It's a long journey," he warned. and Boston is very different from Pine Creek." Aurora smiled. "I'm not afraid of journeys, Isaac. Not with you beside me." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, I think it's time James met the East Coast. He should know all parts of his heritage." Isaac drew her into his arms, holding her close. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured into her hair. Aurora thought of that moment years ago when a stranger had broken down the door of her prison and offered her freedom. "We made our own luck," she replied, "both of us. When you broke that door down and when I chose to take your hand." "You're free with me," Isaac quoted his own words from that day, smiling at the memory. Aurora kissed him softly. "And you with me," she added. "That's what love is, isn't it? Not possession or control, but the freedom to be truly ourselves, together." As they sat in the warm parlor of the home they had built, their child sleeping peacefully nearby, Aurora knew with absolute certainty that she had found what her uncle had tried to deny her, not just freedom, but the belonging that comes with true love, the kind that liberates rather than confines. Outside, the Montana sky spread vast and star-filled above their ranch, a constant reminder of the boundless possibilities that lay before them. Together, they would face whatever came, joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge, with the same courage and determination that had brought them to this moment. And each night, when Aurora laid her head on Isaac's shoulder, she silently thanked the twist of fate that had brought this man to her door. This cowboy who had broken through her prison and offered not just escape, but a love that had healed her wounded spirit and given her a life more rich and full than she had ever dared to dream.